February 13th, 1945, a Red Army soldier raised the Soviet flag atop the New York Palace in Budapest, marking the Hungarian capital's fall after 108 days of gruesome fighting. The Red Army had been on a warpath across Eastern Europe since Kursk, crushing all German resistance in its path. With its resources depleted, the once mighty German army was too exhausted to mount an effort that could alter the war's course. On February 17, 1945, the Supreme High Command of the Red Army issued a directive for the 2nd and 3rd Ukrainian Fronts to prepare a massive mid-March attack towards Vienna and Bratislava, aiming to crush the enemy with a mighty blow of Soviet infantry and armor. However, Red Army commanders overlooked one crucial detail in their planning. Elite SS units of the German armed forces were staged along the front to spearhead a significant operation aimed to recapture a vast amount of territory and inflict major casualties on the Red Army. As the directive was issued, their troops were already advancing against Soviet positions in northern Hungary. Germany was on the verge of defeat, but they were fighting to the last man standing. During the war, there were numerous instances of Germans taking the initiative when their opponents least expected it. The last such event was the Ardennes Offensive, which took place 2 months earlier. Now, similarly to their offensive at the Western Front, the German High Command was planning to launch an assault against the Red Army troops at the Eastern Front. Even though the Soviets were approaching dangerously close to the German border, Hitler and his generals decided to strike the enemy in the valley of the Danube in Hungary. The region was recognized for its strategic importance as Hitler aimed to secure Germany's last vital resources of oil, bauxite, and manganese in Hungary's Dunatul region. These resources were crucial for the Third Reich's survival. The operation was codenamed Frühlingswarhahen, or Spring Awakening. The German plan, however, faced significant challenges. The Soviet 7th Guards Army held a strong position on the west bank of the Hron River, the left tributary of the Danube. This position threatened the left flank of the German-Hungarian Allied forces and could potentially enable a Soviet advance towards key locations like Bratislava. Therefore, before commencing the all-out assault on Soviet positions in Hungary, the Germans needed to deal with this pocket. General Otto Wöhler, commanding the German Heeresgruppe Süd, began planning an attack on the Soviet pocket. The plan, codenamed Operation Südwind or South Wind, was devised with the objective of eliminating the Soviet pocket at the Hron, which the reconnaissance indicated was fortified and possibly reinforced with armored units. In a bold move, the Germans initiated another high-stakes operation scheduled for February 17th. Their previous operation in the Ardennes had failed. This raised a critical question. Would this new offensive yield a different outcome? The Hron pocket was held by the forces of the 7th Guards Army under the command of Colonel General Mikhail Stepanovich Shumilov. The north side of the pocket was occupied by the elements of the 24th Guards Rifle Corps, consisting of 81st Guards Rifle Division, 72nd Guards Rifle Division, and 6th Guards Airborne Division. The west side of the pocket was defended by the 25th Guard Rifle Corps, with the following units comprising it: 409th Rifle Division, 375th Rifle Division, and elements of the 53rd Rifle Division. Infantry troops were supported by the 36th Guard Tank Brigade and the 14th Guards Mechanized Brigade of the 4th Guards Mechanized Corps. These units numbered only 19 34-85 tanks and one Su-85 self-propelled gun. Luckily for the Germans, the main threat, the 6th Guards Tank Army, was positioned on the eastern bank of Hron for recovery. Attached to the 7th Guards Army were the 93rd Guard Rifle Division and the 27th Independent Guards Tank Brigade with 7 operational T-34 tanks and 4 Su-85 self-propelled guns. The Soviet forces had established a well-layered defense system in the Hron pocket. The Soviets fortified their positions, especially around the village of Bart. Furthermore, a network of echelon trenches extended across the pocket from Hron to the Danube. Despite these efforts, the Soviet troops did face certain limitations in their defensive capabilities. The rifle divisions had received minimal reinforcements, casting doubts on their reliability in combat. However, the biggest issue in the Soviet defensive system was that they completely failed to detect German regrouping at the front line of the pocket. Even though the Germans performed the regrouping maneuver in complete secrecy, the Soviet staff's inability to identify opposing forces was a significant oversight. This gap in intelligence was likely to impact the response to the German offensive. The elements of the German 8th Army assigned to the offensive, which the Soviets overlooked, consisted of the following forces. The key component of the assault force was the Panzer Corps, Feldhalle, which comprised 3 infantry divisions. The first was the 44th Reichsgrenadier Division, Hochen Deutschmeister. It comprised 3 medium-strength, 3 average, and 1 weak grenadier battalions, totaling 1,600 men. Supporting these were a medium-strength replacement battalion of 300 men and an engineer battalion of 200 men. Despite a high overall mobility, the division was deemed fit only for limited offensive actions. The 46th Infantry Division's composition was similar. It included 3 medium-strength and 2 average grenadier battalions, totaling 1,800 men. A strong replacement battalion, an engineer battalion, and 22 heavy anti-tank guns. Additional units were attached to this division, including 3 strong Hungarian battalions still in training. Like the 44th, this division was considered suitable only for limited offensive operations. The 211th Volksgrenadier Division was the third key element, though its strength was compromised. Its combined combat strength was about 1,000 men. This division also had several attached units, including heavy anti-tank guns and artillery batteries. Despite high mobility, the division was too fit only for limited offenses. As an auxiliary unit, Kampfgruppe Stabwasser, consisting of 3 infantry battalions, was attached to the corps. The armored Kampfgruppe of the Panzer Corps, Feldhalle, was its formidable element. It included the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion, Feldhalle, with 25 Tiger B heavy tanks, the 208th Tank Battalion with a mix of Panzer IVs and Yacht Panzers, several Panzer Grenadier battalions, and a tank destroyer unit. However, a critical component of the German armored strength in the operation was the 1st SS Panzer Corps. Units comprising the corps were the battle-hardened 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. As these diverse units assembled, the stage was set for a confrontation. With its mix of infantry, armored units, and artillery, the German military faced the challenge of leveraging its limited offensive capabilities against a formidable Soviet opposition. On February 17th, just before dawn, Operation Southwind commenced with an intense artillery barrage. The 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion initiated its attack at 0420 hours. The tanks, arranged in a strategic formation and supported by infantry, advanced under the cover of their own artillery. The German forces struggled against this challenging terrain due to melting snow and a flooded Paris Canal, as well as the Soviets' fortified positions. The Soviet artillery soon countered, causing significant casualties among the supporting grenadiers of the 44th Reichsgrenadier Division. During the assault, 1 German Tiger was lost when it hit a mine. Its burning wreckage illuminated the battlefield and made the rest of the German tanks vulnerable to Soviet anti-tank fire. Despite these setbacks, the German 44th Reichsgrenadier Division pressed on, eventually overwhelming a Soviet artillery battery. However, they faced the formidable Soviet 6th Guards Airborne Division, which showed some tough resistance, inflicting heavy losses on the incoming Germans. Still, the brave Soviet paratroopers were not able to withhold the torrent of German infantry and tanks and eventually succumbed to their attacks. Already in the morning of September 17th, the Germans overrun the village of Nemetz-Jogen. Simultaneously, the 46th Infantry Division advanced against the 72nd Guard Rifle Division, pushing back the surprised Soviets. Supported by the tanks and Jagdpanzers of the 208th Tank Battalion and the Luftwaffe, they swiftly advanced towards the Paris Canal. The 211th Volksgrenadier Division on the leftmost flank, attacking towards Bart, encountered the fiercest Soviet resistance. Their advance was significantly delayed, and one regimental group even being pushed back by a surprise Soviet counterattack. The village of Bart, the initial mission objective, remained beyond their reach. The 1st SS Panzer Division closed in behind the 46th Infantry Division, divided into two Kampfgruppe, the infantry group, led by SS Obersturmbannführer Max Hansen, and the tank group under SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper. Panzer Group Peiper, supported by Kampfgruppe Hansen, encountered fierce Soviet anti-tank fire in the region southeast of Nemetz-Jogin. However, using their armor's formidable protection, they knocked out the Soviet positions, enabling a breakthrough towards the Paris Canal. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend launched its attack in the aftermath, following the path of the 46th Infantry Division. By nightfall, they too had reached the Paris Canal and established a bridgehead on its south bank. Meanwhile, in the south, the German Kampfgruppe Hupe exploited the departure of the Soviet 93rd Guards Rifle Division to help repel the German attack from the north and the west across the Danube. In the south, the Germans also deployed artillery near Erstegram, targeting Soviet tanks and self-propelled guns in Parkany. The Luftwaffe also supported the operation with an air raid in the area of the village of Binny east of Bart. By night, the Germans established two bridgeheads across the Paris Canal. Unlike the Battle of the Bulge, the German assault already met its initial goals on the first day of the battle, although with many difficulties and at a high cost. On February 18th, the German offensive continued with relentless determination. On the right flank, Kampfgruppe Stabwasser successfully pushed towards Bad Dorkeshi. The 44th Reichsgrenadier Division made a strategic crossing of the canal at Kisuchvalu and by the afternoon had taken control of the important village of Kobelkut. The Tiger B tanks of the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion overcame a fortified Soviet anti-tank position northwest of Kisuchvalu. Accompanied by mounted grenadiers, they advanced towards Parkany, navigating through minefields and engaging in intense combat. As night fell, they reached the outskirts of Bela. Near midnight, they spotted signal rockets from Panzer Group Peiper, who reached the village of Muzla, south of them. After making a significant advance on the first day of the operation, the 46th Infantry Division encountered a stiff Soviet defense. Despite this, they managed to push into the area of Libad, a few miles north of Bela. The Germans had reached the center of the enemy pocket. Meanwhile, the 211th Volksgrenadier Division repeated assaults on Bart were met with staunch Soviet defense. Forced into an offensive stance, the Germans were forced to repel several Soviet reconnaissance efforts. Amidst these engagements, the German High Command anticipated a Soviet attempt to establish a new main line of resistance along Bart, Libad, northern Danube. They tasked the 1st SS Panzer Division with flanking the Soviet position, the 46th Infantry Division advancing eastward along the Paris Canal, and the 211th Volksgrenadier Division containing anticipated Soviet flank attacks near Bart. On February 19th, Soviet forces of the 25th Guards Rifle Corps in the southern sector of the pocket faced a dire situation. As dawn broke, Kampfgruppe Stabwasser successfully captured the village of Buchs and Bad Dorkeshi, routing the remaining Soviet units. The 44th Reichsgrenadier Division advanced south from Kobelkut towards the Danube. They aimed to clear the area between Buchs and Muzla of any remaining Soviet forces. The division made significant progress, assisted by the Tiger B heavy tanks and Jagdpanzer 38 tank destroyers of the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion. However, upon reaching Bad Dorkeshi, they found that Kampfgruppe Stabwasser had already secured the village. Meanwhile, the 46th Infantry Division skillfully occupied hills southeast of Libad, gaining a strategic vantage point over the Haran River. However, their attached armored Kampfgruppe Schoneich faced significant resistance at command, and their evening attack on Kameni Most on the banks of Haran ended up unsuccessful. Panzer Battalion 208 faced a challenging situation in Babit Pushta. Their advance was hampered by the failure of the German infantry to provide support. Encountering Soviet artillery, anti-tank gunfire, and infantry counterattacks, they suffered heavy losses and were forced to abandon their vehicles temporarily. The battalion was significantly weakened and played no further part in the operation. The 1st SS Panzer Division was the most prolific of all German units advancing from Muzla toward Parkany. However, on their path, they too encountered tough Soviet resistance. Soviet engineers set up mines on a stone bridge, immobilizing several Panzer IV and Panther tanks. After clearing the mines, the Germans pressed on, only to be attacked by Soviet ground attack aircraft, which also caused them significant damage. Despite the resistance, German panzers reached the Parkany railway station at 1300 hours. Over there, they were attacked by Soviet tanks, resulting in the loss of another Panther. However, the German forces swiftly retaliated, knocking out 2 T-34s, while the arriving Tiger B heavy tanks and Panthers eliminated 2 more. Intense urban combat ensued in Parkany, with the Germans making considerable advancements. However, the Soviets maintained control of the air, launching continuous ground attack aircraft raids, causing heavy losses to the German armored formations. Despite the air superiority of the Soviets, the 25th Guards Rifle Corps faced overwhelming German forces. By the end of the day, men of the 1st SS Panzer Division at Parkany were joined by the troops of the 12th Panzer Division, the Kampfgruppe Hupe, and the units of the 711th Infantry Division, which entered the town from across the Danube. Ultimately, the Soviets abandoned their positions in the evening and retreated east of the Hron, leaving most of their heavy weapons behind. The destruction of the 25th Guards Rifle Corps left the 24th Guard Rifle Corps to defend the remaining pocket. Assessing the situation, the German 8th Army planned to regroup its troops for the upcoming tasks. The 1st SS Panzer Division and the 46th Infantry Division were ordered to move northward and occupy the village of Kameny Most from the south, while the 12th SS Panzer Division and 44th Reichsgrenadier Division were to move towards Bart, where the Germans made no progress whatsoever during these first 3 days of the offensive. On February 20th, German divisions began a crucial regrouping. Elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division were gradually relieved by the 44th Reichsgrenadier Division. They moved towards the new assembly area northwest of Bart. The weary troops, having endured relentless assaults, finally received much-needed rest and supplies. During the night, the 6th and 7th companies of the 1st SS Panzer Division, equipped with Panzer IV tanks, launched an attack alongside the 46th Infantry Division towards Kameny Most. Despite their efforts, they faced formidable resistance from the Soviet defense, stalling their advance. February 20th proved even more disastrous for Panzer Battalion 208. At dawn, 5 of their armored fighting vehicles were destroyed by the Soviets. Trapped in a valley with only 11 combat-ready tanks and Jagdpanzers, they were relentlessly bombarded with anti-tank and mortar fire. Despite repelling a Soviet infantry attack, they suffered further losses as the day progressed. In a desperate move, their commander ordered the crew to abandon their vehicles and retreat on foot. Despite losing the ground, Soviet soldiers of the 24th Guard Rifle Corps and the 4th Guard Mechanized Corps were committed to defending the remaining pocket, now 10 kilometers wide and 4 kilometers deep. At the break of dawn on February 21st, the 1st SS Panzer Division, in concert with the 46th Infantry Division, launched an attack on Kameny Most from the south and west. The Soviets, prepared with tanks, flamethrowers, and a multitude of anti-tank guns, established an effective defensive fire system in the village. The Germans suffered considerable losses due to intense Soviet artillery and mortar fire and low-level attacks by Soviet ground attack aircraft. As night fell, the German forces renewed their assault. In the ensuing night battle, the Germans eventually ousted the Soviets from the village, gaining full control by 2100 hours. At 2230 hours, Grenadier battalions of the 44th Reichsgrenadier Division attacked Soviet positions south of Bart. This offensive aimed to protect the rear of the troops in Kameny Most and to secure the assembly area west of Bart for the 12th SS Panzer Division, scheduled to attack at dawn. The German armored units encountered Soviet T-34 tanks and self-propelled guns. The encounter was brief and overwhelmingly in favor of the Germans, resulting in the destruction of the Soviet vehicles with no losses on their part. However, their advance was eventually stopped by a formidable Soviet anti-tank defense comprising 25 guns, leading to a retreat after losing 3 Tiger Bs. After 5 days of combat, the mounting losses of the SS Panzer divisions at the Harran pocket raised concerns in the 6th Panzer Army, which requested their immediate withdrawal. Though Hirschgruppe Süd had previously resisted these requests, it now instructed the preparation of a withdrawal schedule. On the morning of February 22nd, the Soviet troops in their remaining bridgehead continued to show fierce resistance. The 1st SS Panzer Division and elements of the 46th Infantry Division engaged in clearing Kameny Most. Harran encountered strong Soviet pockets of resistance both in the village and on the west bank of the Harran. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler-Jugend, having moved into position the previous night, launched an assault at 04:45 hours against Bart. As the panzers commenced the attack, supported by artillery, mortars, and Nebelwerfer, they encountered a Soviet minefield. Several tanks were damaged. Under heavy Soviet fire, repairs were hastily made, and the armored vehicles took shelter to engage Soviet anti-tank guns. The intense Soviet artillery and mortar fire inflicted heavy casualties on the Panzer Grenadiers. The SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 26, attacking from the east through the minefield, managed to break through the Soviet positions. 3 armored personnel carriers managed to penetrate into the village. Supported by their own tanks, they advanced to the southeastern edge of Bart. The impact of their 2-centimeter tracer fragmentation shells was devastating, practically ruining most houses. However, the Soviet T-34 and T-34-85 tanks soon forced the armored personnel carriers to take cover. However, without infantry support, the Soviet tanks eventually left the village and retreated eastwards. SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 25, delayed in reaching its starting position, finally joined the fight, securing the western part of Bart. By the morning, the Germans had cleared the village of Soviet forces. The Soviets left behind combat-ready T-34s, heavy howitzers, anti-tank guns, mortars, and other vehicles, with 80 prisoners captured, including a colonel. The Soviet-held pocket on the west bank of the Harran was now reduced to the area between Kameny and Bini. On February 23rd, German forces underwent tactical regrouping amidst continuous Soviet artillery fire. Plans for a night assault aimed to dismantle the remaining Soviet bridgehead between Kameny and Bini. Key German divisions prepared for a coordinated strike at 0200 hours on February 24th, with a goal of capturing strategic positions without extended artillery preparation, despite efforts of extended German bombardment before the assault. In the early hours of February 24th, under the cover of darkness, a decisive operation began to eliminate the last strongholds of the Harran pocket. The German 46th Infantry Division, following a brief but intense artillery barrage, launched an assault to eliminate Soviet defenders holding a strategic bridgehead at the village of Kameny. Supporting the offensive was the 1st SS Panzer Division, which attacked the village from the south. The formidable force, including 100 tanks, aimed to break through Soviet defenses. However, the Soviets, entrenched in a sophisticated system of trenches and armed with anti-tank guns, were ready to repel the invaders. The battle for Kameny turned into a grueling house-to-house fight. German infantrymen, armed with MP-44 assault rifles, led the charge. The Germans encountered increasingly stiff opposition from machine guns, mortars, and rocket launchers. Yet by late afternoon, after regrouping and pressing their attack, they successfully cleared the village of Soviet forces. The Soviet defense was reduced to a critical crossing over the Harran River. The task of holding the bridge fell to 3 Soviet T-34-85 tanks. Despite being heavily outnumbered, these tanks, through a combination of artillery and direct fire, they destroyed a significant number of German armored vehicles. This act of bravery led to the tank commanders and their gunners being awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union. However, the situation was not improving. The Soviets, recognizing the intensity of the German assault in their own precarious position, decided to retreat. After crossing to the river's eastern bank, they destroyed the Harran bridge to slow the German advance. At the second of the 2 last Soviet strongholds, the village of Bini, the Germans faced well-camouflaged Soviet defensive positions. Despite the lack of preliminary artillery bombardment, the Germans launched a surprise attack. Through a combination of tank support and infantry assault, they overcame the Soviet defenders, capturing Brno by mid-morning. After 8 days of bitter fighting, the command of the German 8th Army reported to the Army Group South that Operation Southwind, aimed at eliminating the Soviet pocket at the Hron, had ended. The Germans secured a significant victory by utilizing a blend of armored and infantry tactics and exploiting the element of surprise, trademarks of their war tactics throughout the entire war. On the other side, despite facing overwhelming odds, the Soviet defenders demonstrated remarkable resilience and courage, leaving a lasting legacy of heroism in the face of adversity. The battle cost them 8,194 soldiers, 54 tanks and self-propelled guns, and 459 other types of guns. The Germans too suffered their share of casualties, with 6,471 men lost and 130 panzers and Jagdpanzers knocked out. The high casualties among the Germans, despite their victory, were largely due to the infantry divisions bearing the brunt of the fighting. Indeed, the Germans had achieved their goals. The Soviets were dealt a significant blow, and a potential threat to further German operations was eliminated, albeit at a great cost, as the Germans had pushed back their already exhausted troops to the brink of collapse. However, of greater significance was the loss of the element of surprise by the Germans. The Soviets learned their lesson and would be prepared for the upcoming Operation Spring Awakening.